Frank, what's up, my man? How you doing?
Did it snow on you down in Nashville? I know a lot of
No,
people were probably
I
hoping that
heard
you
you
would get
guys.
snowed on.
No, it doesn't snow down here anymore. We haven't had like a legit snowfall in a long time. And my 10-year-old was talking about. He was like, "Dad, I used to be super excited for the idea of snow days, but he was like, now I think they would just make us go remote. I don't know if snow days are still a thing. How much snow actually fell in New York? I was watching a couple of guys I follow." And they said they might get a foot in Central Park, which is a pretty monstrous snowfall, especially in this early in December.
Yeah, it looks like between 6 and 8 inches. Last year we didn't get. I don't even think we got any snow
Yeah.
last year. So then now, but it's funny that your son said that because that was the first thing I thought about last spring when everything started on Zoom. I said there should never be another snow day again for any of these kids because
Yeah.
you know how it works now. Wait till your kids go to college. All they are is off all the time.
Yeah.
The schools come up with any reason they can not to be in school. But the one thing that always shows up on time that never misses a day is when they send you that bill. I'm already getting bills for the spring semester.
Oh, of course.
We just finished the fall. Can we?
Yeah.
Let's slow down a little bit.
I'll tell you this, like my 10-year-old, we were driving in the car yesterday, and he said, "You know what, Dad?" I said, "What?" He said, "I know people are saying it's a bad year, but he's like, 2020 is the best year ever." He said, "I didn't have to go to school from March to the rest of the year." He said, I won 3 Little League championships, and I don't know how a year could be any better at all." And I was like, "Well, bud, I'm glad, 2020 and to him is the best year that's ever existed," because he's like, when I had my birthday and I made my wish when I blew out my candles, I didn't tell anybody, but I wished that school would get canceled. And guess what? School ended up getting canceled. He's like, this is, and you think about it from a kid perspective. And, when you're like 9 or 10 or, maybe 14 or 15, depends on the age, but you get one snow day and you're like, oh, this is amazing. Like I remember every now and then when I was a kid, we did have an occasional snow day. And the best was we had one snow day that kind of came out of nowhere. It wasn't forecast. All of a sudden there was just like 5 inches. And I remember, when you're getting up every morning super early and you're a teenager, you're like, this is the worst. And I remember waking up at like 9 o'clock one morning, just like feeling so incredibly rested. And I was like, oh my God, what happened? And then, you look outside the window and like 5 inches of snow happened overnight. Nobody was anticipating it. But basically that's what happened to a ton of kids out there for March, April, and May. They got like a 3-month snow day.
And I think the moral of the story is the fact that your son looks at the glass half full.
Yeah.
And that he's an optimistic guy means that he got that trait from his mother, basically.
Yeah, no kidding. So speaking of optimism, I got to say this because I don't think it's gotten enough credit. Everybody out there, and you heard all of this too, there was a lot of doom and gloom about the idea that football could be played. And I'm going to leave the Pac-12 and the Big Ten out of this for a moment. But if you look at the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12 with their conference championships going on this weekend, and with the NFL that seems to a large extent have gotten its COVID issues under control, the NFL seems poised to finish their regular season without having to add any weeks, which I think both you and I would have bet early in the season, man, there's no way this is going to be able to happen. And not only have the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12 finish their seasons, or they will in 2 days on Saturday, and the Pac-12 and the Big Ten are doing whatever they're doing. We'll maybe get to that in a minute. But they've done it with fans present and without any serious health consequences for anybody. That's a pretty remarkable achievement relative to what expectations were, isn't it?
Well, and the fact that the Big Ten is going to play a conference championship game when they were the ones who had decided over the summer that they weren't going to have a season, and remember all the fallout from that. It's what I find pretty interesting is I think there were a lot of schools and a lot of people in college sports that thought, why don't we just start real early at some point in August just to try to get through this? And now you think about, the Big Ten, to their credit, kind of shifted gears pretty quickly. The Pac-12 obviously didn't. And I think the one thing we've learned through this whole thing about the Big Ten is that they could shift gears at any moment, like they did restarting their season and then changing the rules on the fly to allow Ohio State to play in the conference championship game. So if there's one thing we learned is that the Big Ten is pretty flexible. But I give college football credit in a lot of ways. Listen, there have been a lot of games that have been canceled, but now we've kind of reached the point where, kind of the team that you expect to be playing in the college football playoff, they're still playing right now. And, this weekend will be pretty interesting, and you'll get some bowl games. I get it. I think considering where we were in March, April, and May, and to get through this like they did, I give college football a lot of credit. And plus, let's remember, too, it's kept a lot of people employed.
Yeah,
it's entertained a lot of people. I think it's kind of lifted people's spirits, because you and I talk about it all the time. Never underestimate, this country's insatiable appetite for football, whether it's professional football or college football. It kind of helped, I think, a lot of people get through a difficult part of their lives.
No doubt. We're talking to Frank Isola. You can watch him on ESPN. You can listen to him on Sirius XM, and you can hear him every Thursday to start off the show here in the first hour with us. So does it feel to you like the College Football Playoff Committee is under siege, and basically people are calling them out as the emperor who wears no clothes? Because there doesn't seem – this has always been the challenge, I think, with the College Football Playoff Committee in general. All we do is argue about college football. Oh, this conference is better. Oh, that conference is better. It's very regionalized. And the College Football Playoff Committee has so many criteria with which to analyze the best teams that basically you can find a justification to do anything you want. To wit, for years, the College Football Playoff Committee has told Notre Dame, hey, we're going to knock you down a peg because you only play 12 games. There's no conference championship game, and other teams out there are playing 13 games. Now Ohio State is going to play 6, and Notre Dame and Clemson and Alabama and Florida, at a minimum, are going to play 11 games, nearly twice as many, and the College Football Playoff Committee seems pretty intent to just be like, hey, we believe Ohio State's one of the 4 best teams. And also, by the way, we believe that the matchup potentially involving Ohio State in a year where television has lost money hand over fist and where all of the leagues have lost money hand over fist as well, it seems like they're just going to throw their hands up and say, we're going to put the best 2 games out there that the most people are going to watch, and we don't care what anybody else thinks. Is that a fair analysis of the situation in general?
I definitely think so. Whenever I watch the Olympics, and it's always like figure skating or diving or gymnastics, where it's based on somebody judging them, I'm always like, well, you can kind of pick who you want to win. And that's, the old joke about the Russian judge giving the American a bad score. So to your point, it's Alabama and Ohio State, enough said. And then it's Notre Dame.
Yep.
We know how popular they are. And then you have a team like Clemson, which now has become a big program. They have the matinee idol as their starting quarterback. There's a caste system in college football. There's a caste system when it comes to the conferences. Clearly the SEC, and rightfully so, they're the big powerhouse. And the Big Ten, if it's Ohio State or Michigan that's got the great record, you know that they want them in there. And it's Notre Dame. And teams like Cincinnati and even Texas A&M. Listen, maybe the SEC country, certainly in Texas A&M is a big deal. Up here in like the Northeast, no. If you're asking people that live in this part of the country, would they want to see those 4 teams in the college football playoff, they would say yes. And you'd feel bad for Cincinnati that they're not going to get a chance. But the 4 teams that are in it right now, I think those are the 4 teams that a lot of people, certainly in this part of the world, would want to see. And I think this year, especially to your point, I think television ratings have a lot to do with it. And I think the ratings for those games will be really good. Let me ask you this, though. Notre Dame loses a close game, they're still going to get in. It's still going to be Clemson and Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame would not only have to lose to Clemson, I think they'd have to get blown out, and something might have to happen to Ian Book, right? Where he gets such a substantial injury that he's not able to play, and you have to go back and essentially recalibrate the entirety of Notre Dame's roster in order to get to the point where you're not putting them in the playoff. A little bit like Alabama last year with Tua. I know they ended up losing to Auburn, but the injury was so significant that it rewrote every expectation that you might have had with Alabama, given how good Tua is. Now we know Mac Jones has turned into a first-round caliber quarterback this year as well, but we didn't have enough evidence of that to be able to really analyze Alabama in that same context. So I think barring an injury like that, that's what's going to happen. And I think it's going to be Alabama against Notre Dame, and I think it's going to be Clemson against Ohio State, going to that point about this effectively being a committee designed to put together the best television matchups. They don't want a third Clemson-Notre Dame game And so I think they'll procedurally bump up Ohio State and bump down Notre Dame. Now, the one wrinkle is I do think it would kind of throw them into an uproar if Florida were to beat Alabama, because Florida's 9-2, but then I think Dan Mullen could rightly argue, hey, 9 wins in the SEC is a pretty big deal, and we just beat the number 1 overall team in the country to win the conference championship in the best conference in America. How are you going to leave the SEC champion out? Well, I think that would be a tough argument for the College Football Playoff Committee, and I think that would end up being a challenge because Ohio State would only be 6-0, and Florida's big win over Alabama would be infinitely bigger than any big win that Ohio State has.
And this is why, for me, and I know we've talked about this before, about getting 8 teams in there, then you play the first round on campus at the higher seeded place. All right, so a team like Texas A&M, it's always going to be hard for them to crack the top 4. Just like clearly for Cincinnati, it would be extremely difficult for them to crack the top 4. To be in the top 8 is an accomplishment for them, which isn't going to happen all the time. So this is like their one chance in maybe a while. I go back to the NCAA tournament. Like, was it San Diego was having a great year, as was Dayton. It's like, once in every 20 years, they're kind of having this season, and then unfortunately for them, there was no NCAA tournament.
That's why I said Dayton was the biggest loser maybe of all of sports 100%. For the pandemic, because they're never going to be that good again. Sorry, Dayton fans.
And that's why, another Ohio team, Cincinnati, you don't know when they're going to be like a top 8 team. So this is kind of like their chance to be part of something. But to think that they could ever be a top 4 team, it's impossible. So why not open it up? And I get it. Listen, we get to 8, and then everyone's going to scream that there should be 12 teams and give the top 4 seeds a bye, or however you wanted to do it. I get all that. So that part of it is fun because we're always going to talk about the teams that were left out. But I don't know. I don't think playing 3 games, however you could figure out the schedule, I get it. It would be 3 extra games. But playing those first-round games on campus, then having the semifinals in these bowl games, wherever the case may be, I think it would be a lot of fun. And again, it's going to give a team like Cincinnati, like Texas A&M this year, a chance.
I know you're up in New York where it snowed and there's all sorts of other sports to talk about, but do you ever get attracted or pay attention to some of the chaos of the college football searching season? I love all of it, but Auburn in particular right now, we talked about this a little bit on the open of the show. Does anybody have any idea what they're going to end up doing, and is it as amusing to you as someone who's not living in the SEC to kind of see this cat? Because remember, early on, the consensus opinion was, hey, it's a COVID year. I don't really think that they're going to fire coaches in college football on the same level, right? Then Will Muschamp gets fired. Gus Malzahn gets fired. Lovie Smith, Kevin Sumlin, all the drama surrounding Texas and Michigan, even though they might have ended up keeping their coaches. I mean, this is it doesn't feel that much different than a normal offseason.
Yeah, I just think it's so much pressure on these college administrators. And it's crazy, the Auburn job, listen, you could clearly win big there. You are going up against a giant all the time. The thing that always blows me away about these college football jobs, in some ways it's like the European soccer jobs. If you fail, like your first or second year, it's like they're looking to get rid of you. But also the money. Go start comparing sometimes the money that college football coaches make compared to what some of these managers in Major League Baseball make. These dudes are managing 162 games. Their spring training is 6 weeks long. They have a long year.
Yes.
Some of these guys, you'd be shocked at how little money, relatively speaking, they make compared to college football coaches. College football coaches make sneaky, big-time money. It's insane the money they make. They bounce around, and whenever a guy gets fired and you see what his buyout was or how much he has left, it knocks you back. That's why the guys will be lining up for the Auburn job, even if it means you got to go up against Nick Saban in Alabama all the time.